He had not been refused in 11 years. Not since before Eleanor. Not since before the night the rain was heavy, and the road was wet, and the call came at 2 in the morning from a number he did not recognize. He had built walls after that night. Not deliberately, the way certain things build, gradually, without announcement, until one morning you look up and the walls are there, and you cannot remember exactly when they became permanent. He had come to the cottage because the property needed to be cleared. Simple. Legal. Final. The woman had been given notice. 3 notices, each one ignored with the particular stubbornness of someone who had decided that the notices did not apply to her. He drove up the lane on a Tuesday morning with his lawyer and the expression of a man who has decided. He knocked. She answered. Perhaps 35. Dark hair, a child on her hip, another behind her legs. And she said, without hesitation, without fear, I know why you're here, and I'm not leaving, so you'll have to decide what to do with that. He stood on the doorstep of his own cottage and felt something crack open in the place where the walls were. He did not know yet what he was about to find. He did not know that the woman who refused to leave his cottage had known his wife. His name was William Ashworth. He was 44 years old and had been, for 3 of those years, the particular kind of person that grief produces when grief is not processed but managed, the kind that continues to function, that builds and acquires and decides, that is by every external measure exactly what it was before, and that is, in every internal measure, something entirely different. He had loved Eleanor completely. This was the thing nobody talked about afterward. Not his colleagues, not his board, not his sister Charlotte, who tried, and who he appreciated trying, and who he consistently deflected. Nobody talked about the loving completely, because the loving completely was the part that made the loss impossible. You could grieve the loss of someone you loved partially. You could process it, integrate it, carry it. The loss of someone you loved completely was something else. It was structural. It changed what you were made of. He had become efficient. He had become precise. He had acquired 17 properties in 18 months because acquiring things gave the days shape, and shape was preferable to the alternative. The cottage in West Haven was number 14. He had sent 3 notices to the existing tenant, a Mrs. Sarah Reeves, 34, widow, 2 children. The notices had not been answered. He had his lawyer prepare a 4th, and then he had decided. With the specific decisiveness of someone who did not like unresolved things, to handle it himself. The cottage was not what the acquisition photographs had shown. He registered this as he came up the lane, the particular difference between a property documented and a property lived in. The acquisition photographs had shown a standard rural rental, slightly neglected. The minimum maintenance standard. What he found was a garden, not an elaborate garden, not the kind that required resources or a gardener, or the specific investment of someone with money to spend on appearances, the kind that required time and intention and the specific love of someone who understood that things grew when you paid attention to them. Vegetable beds along the south wall, flowers along the path, the practical kind, the kind that came back year after year without replanting. A garden near the gate with handwritten labels on wooden stakes, window boxes, a child's swing in the old apple tree, made from rope and a piece of worn wood. He took all of this in without expression. He knocked. She answered quickly. He had been expecting. He examined this honestly, standing on the step. He had been expecting someone desperate, someone frightened, someone who would see him and understand, from his presence and his lawyer's presence, that the situation had moved beyond letters. Sarah Reeves was not frightened. She was 34, and she had dark hair pulled back in the practical way of someone who had been doing something before the door knocked. And she had a 2-year-old on her hip who was regarding him with the comprehensive assessment of someone forming an opinion, and a 4-year-old behind her legs who had assessed him and reached a preliminary conclusion that was not favorable. She looked at him. He looked at her. "I know why you're here," she said, "and I'm not leaving, so you'll have to decide what to do with that." His lawyer, Dr. Park H.'s excellent, stepped forward with the prepared documents. Single quotes Mrs. Reeves. 3 notices have been sent to this address, none of which I know about the notices, she said. "I've read them carefully. I've also spoken to a solicitor." "Then you understand that legally. I understand what the law says," she said. "I also understand that the law takes time, and that time is what I'm asking for." She looked past Dr. Park directly at William. "Not forever, not indefinitely. Time." William looked at her. "How much time?" He said. "Enough to find somewhere," she said. "Which is harder than it sounds when you have 2 children under 5 and a teacher's salary and a rental market that doesn't." She stopped. She began again. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for time." "We've given you time," Dr. Park said. 3 notices over. "You've given me letters," she said. "Nobody has asked me what I need." The 2-year-old on her hip patted her face. The 4-year-old behind her legs had not moved. William looked at the garden. He looked at the swing in the apple tree. He looked at the woman who had just told his lawyer that nobody had asked what she needed, which was accurate, which was something he had not considered. "What do you need?" he said. Dr. Park looked at him. Sarah looked at him. 6 months, she said. "Give me 6 months and I will find somewhere and I will go." "You said that in the second notice," Dr. Park said quietly to William. I know," William said. He looked at Sarah. "I'll give you 6 months," he said. "Thank you," she said. If in 6 months I'm still here," she said, "you can take me to court, and I won't fight it." He nodded. He turned back to the car. "Mr. Ashworth," she said. He turned. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said. He looked at her. "I read about it," she said, "when I was researching who owned the property. I'm sorry." He did not know what to say. He said, "Thank you." He got in the car. He sat for a long moment before he told the driver to go. His sister called on the Thursday. Charlotte Ashworth was 41 and had been, for 3 years, the person who tried hardest to reach her brother and who had learned, through consistent failure, to try in ways that did not announce themselves as trying. "The West Haven property," she said. "How do you know about West Haven?" "Dr. Park mentioned it," she said. "He was worried about the decision." "It's a business decision," William said. "Is it?" Charlotte said. "Not a question." 6 months, he said. "It's a reasonable extension." "William," Charlotte said. "Yes." "When did you last make a decision about a property based on what a tenant needed?" He was quiet. "She has 2 children," he said. "Yes," Charlotte said. "And a teacher's salary," he said. "Yes," she said. "It's a reasonable extension," he said. "Of course," Charlotte said. "Tell me about her." "There's nothing to tell," he said. "William," she said. "Charlotte," he said. You went yourself, she said. You never go yourself. He looked at his office, at the desk, the view, the particular efficient arrangement of a life lived correctly and alone. She wasn't frightened, he said. I expected her to be frightened. She wasn't. No, Charlotte said. She told Dr. Park that nobody had asked what she needed, he said. And she was right. Yes, Charlotte said. That's all, he said. Of course, Charlotte said. She did not believe him. He knew she did not believe him. He was not entirely sure he believed himself. He drove to West Haven on Saturday. He told himself he was checking the property. He came up the lane at 10 in the morning, and she was in the garden with the children. The 2-year-old, Lily, in a small pen near the vegetable beds. The 4-year-old, Tom, doing something serious near the herb garden with a child-sized spade. She saw him through the gate. She did not stop working. You came back, she said. I was in the area, he said. She looked at him with the expression of someone who knew this was not true and had decided not to say so. The labels, he said, on the herbs, are they in your handwriting? She looked at them. Yes, she said. They're very clear, he said. The lettering. I was a primary school teacher, she said. Before the children. Tom appeared beside him. He looked up at William with the 4-year-old thoroughness he had brought to the Tuesday assessment. You came back, Tom said. Yes, William said. Are you going to make us leave? Tom said. Not for 6 months, William said. Tom considered this. That's honest, he said, and handed William a spade. William looked at the spade. He looked at Tom. The bed near the wall needs turning, Tom said. Mama was going to do it. William looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at him with the expression of someone watching something unexpected happen and choosing not to interfere. He took the spade. He dug. She made tea at noon. He had been digging for 2 hours. The particular physical work of turning soil that he had not done before, and that was, he discovered, the most present he had been in 3 years. Not thinking about the portfolio or the board or the particular management of a life efficiently arranged. Just the soil and the spade and the cold air and Tom's occasional supervisory commentary. The kitchen was warm. He sat at the table, the kitchen table of someone who had made a space entirely their own, and looked at the drawings on the walls, children's drawings, the specific bright colors of a child who had not yet learned that art required restraint. Tom's, Sarah said, following his gaze. He draws every day. He says it's how he thinks. What does he think about? William said. Everything, she said. He thought about you, apparently. There's one of the car coming up the lane. He looked at the drawings more carefully. There it was, a black car, a lane, a gate, a figure that was identifiably not friendly. That's me, he said. On Tuesday, she said. Single quotes yes. I look intimidating, she said. Tom was being accurate. He looked at the drawing. There's one from Saturday too, she said. He found it. The same lane, the same gate, the same figure. Different posture, different. He looked more closely, different expression. Tom had drawn the Tuesday figure with a straight line for a mouth. The Saturday figure had something that was not quite a smile, but was not the straight line either. He noticed, William said. He notices everything, Sarah said. He got it from James. She said it naturally, the name arriving without the specific weight of someone managing grief in company. Just a fact. James. His name. Your husband, William said. Yes, she said. He was a teacher too. Secondary school. History. You were both teachers, he said. We met at a training day, she said. The kind everyone hates. He sat next to me and said, she smiled. The real smile, arriving without planning. He said the only way to survive these things was to make a game of counting how many times the presenter said going forward. We counted 47. William looked at his tea. Eleanor, he said, my wife. She hated jargon. She used to keep a list of words that should be banned from meetings. What was on the list? Synergy was at the top, he said. She said anyone who used it unironically should be asked to leave the room. Sarah laughed. The real laugh, arriving without planning. He had not made anyone laugh in 3 years. The feeling of it was, he sat with this. The feeling of it was something he had forgotten existed. The letter arrived on a Monday, not to Sarah, to William, from his board. Specifically from a man named Richard Calder, non-executive director, 12 years on the board. The kind of man who framed self-interest as fiduciary responsibility and had been doing so for long, enough that he had perhaps stopped noticing the difference. The letter noted, with the specific language of someone who had been building a case, that the West Haven property had been acquired as part of a portfolio strategy, that the portfolio strategy required vacant possession for redevelopment, and that the extension granted to the current tenant was inconsistent with the agreed strategy and potentially exposed the company to questions about preferential treatment. It also noted, and this was the part that made William very still, that Richard had taken the liberty of engaging a property management firm to handle the West Haven matter directly, to ensure the strategy was implemented on schedule. William called Drive.Park. Richard Calder, he said, has engaged a property management firm for West Haven. Yes, Dr. Park said. I received their communication this morning. They're planning to stop it, William said. William, legally Richard has. I'm the majority shareholder, William said. Stop it. It will cause a board issue, Dr. Park said. Then it will cause a board issue, William said. Stop the property management firm. He hung up. He sat for a moment. Then he called Sarah. She answered on the third ring. A man came to the cottage, she said, before he could speak. This morning, with a letter, he said. I know, William said. He said the extension wasn't valid, she said. That you didn't have the authority. It's valid, he said. I have the authority. I've handled it. A pause. William, she said. Yes, what's happening? Someone on my board, he said, decided to take the matter into his own hands. He's been stopped. Why did he do that? William looked at the letter. Because, he said, he thinks the extension is personal rather than professional. Is he wrong? She said. William was quiet for a moment. No, he said. She was quiet too. Tom drew another picture, she said. After the man came this morning, he drew the cottage with a wall around it. A wall, William said. He said it was protection, she said. He asked me if you were the wall. William looked at his office, at the desk. The view, the particular efficient arrangement of a life built carefully behind walls. What did you tell him? He said. I told him, she said, that I didn't know yet. That's honest, he said. I try to be, she said. The board meeting was on a Wednesday. William had called it himself, not because Richard had forced it, but because William had decided that the situation required clarity, and clarity required a room. Richard Calder was 62 and had the specific confidence of someone who had been operating at the board level for long enough that the board level felt like his natural territory. He presented his case with the particular fluency of someone who had prepared it carefully. The strategy, the timeline, the redevelopment value, the inconsistency of the extension, and the personal dimension, Richard said, which I raise not to embarrass anyone, but because the board has a responsibility to ensure that personal considerations don't influence portfolio decisions. The room was quiet. William looked at Richard. The extension, William said, was granted because a widow with 2 children under 5 asked for 6 months to find alternative accommodation. That is not a personal consideration. That is a reasonable response to a reasonable request from a person in a difficult situation. The strategy, William said, is mine. I built this company. I defined the strategy. And the strategy does not require me to evict a widow and 2 children in winter to meet a redevelopment timeline that can be adjusted by 6 months without material impact on returns. He looked around the room. If anyone believes otherwise, he said, they are welcome to bring a formal motion. I will engage with it formally. He paused, and then I will consider whether the board composition requires review. Richard looked at him. William looked back. The West Haven extension stands, William said. The property management firm has been released. This is not a discussion. He came on the Saturday after the board meeting, not with a particular agenda. He had been coming on Saturdays, which had become the pattern, which nobody had decided and nobody had discussed, and which was simply the thing that happened. Tom met him at the gate. I found something, Tom said. What did you find? Come, Tom said. The authority of someone who had a thing to show and was not going to describe it. When showing was available, he led William to the back of the cottage, the part of the garden William had not been to, behind the apple tree, where the hedge was thickest. There was a bench, old wood, weathered, the specific weathering of something that had been outside for years, and on the bench, carved, not painted, carved with the specific intention of someone who had wanted it to last. 2 words, James, Eleanor. William stood very still. They were here, Tom said. Before us. Mama said this was their bench. William looked at the names. James, Eleanor, his wife's name, carved beside the name of a man he had never met. Tom, he said, go and get your mama. Please. Tom assessed him. Are you all right? Tom said. Yes, William said. I just need to talk to her. Tom went. William sat on the bench with the 2 carved names and felt something arrive that he had been keeping at a very specific distance for 3 years. Sarah came around the corner and stopped. She saw the bench. She saw his face. She came and sat beside him. You know, she said. I didn't, he said. Until now. She looked at the names. James brought me here, she said. 2 years before we married. He said he'd found a cottage and he wanted to show me something. She traced the carving. He'd carved the names the summer before. He said he met a woman walking in the lane and they talked for an hour about everything. Books and gardens and what mattered. Eleanor walked, William said. She walked everywhere. She said it was the only time she could think without the noise. James said she was remarkable, Sarah said. He talked about her for years. He never knew her name. William looked at the carving. Eleanor used to walk this lane, he said. Before I knew her, she talked about a cottage she'd found, a garden someone had made. He paused. She said she'd met a man who knew everything about history and nothing about plants. Sarah looked at him. James, she said. James, he said. They sat on the bench with the two carved names and the particular silence of people who have just understood something too large for words. She would have loved this garden, William said. He would have liked you, Sarah said. He liked people who said true things. I'm not sure I do, William said. You're learning, she said. He looked at her. Tom asked if I was the wall, he said. Yes, she said. I've been the wrong kind of wall, he said. For 3 years. The kind that keeps everything out. Yes, she said. I don't want to be that wall anymore, he said. She looked at the garden, at the vegetables and the herbs and the swing and the bench with 2 names. Then don't, she said. Decide to stop. Then stop. Tom said that, he said. He's very wise, she said. 4-4. He got it from somewhere, William said. She looked at him. Yes, she said. He did. He told Dr. Park on the Monday. The West Haven property, he said. I'm transferring it. To whom? To Sarah Reeves, he said. Full transfer. Legal ownership. Dr. Park was quiet for a moment. William, he said. She made it a home, William said. She made a garden from nothing. She kept a promise to a dead man. He paused, and her husband carved my wife's name on a bench 20 years ago because Eleanor walked in that lane, and he thought she was worth remembering. Drive. Park was quiet. That's not a business decision, he said. No, William said. It isn't. Richard will. Richard, William said, can do whatever Richard decides to do. I'll handle it. He handled it. Richard brought the formal motion. William engaged with it formally, and then he reviewed the board composition. Richard left the board in March. The transfer completed in April. He came on a Saturday in May. The garden was. He stopped at the gate and looked at it. The garden was extraordinary. Not because it had changed dramatically since October, because it had continued, because the things planted in autumn had grown through winter and were arriving now into something that had been intended from the beginning and was fulfilling the intention. Tom met him at the gate. The roses are coming, Tom said. Which ones? The ones by the wall, Tom said. Mama said they were here when we arrived. She said someone planted them a long time ago. He looked at the roses along the south wall, old varieties, the kind that required knowing what you were doing, the kind that came back year after year if the soil was right. Eleanor had planted roses everywhere they had ever lived. He stood at the gate for a moment. Then he went in. Sarah was at the bench. She had tea to cups, which meant she had seen the car come up the lane. He sat beside her. The transfer completed, he said. I know, she said. Dr. Park called. It's yours, he said. She looked at the garden. Thank you, she said, for all of it. The extension, the board. The board needed reviewing anyway, he said. She looked at him. William, she said. Yes. Why are you really here? She said. On Saturdays. He looked at the bench, at the 2 carved names, at the roses beginning along the wall, at the swing moving slightly in the May wind. Because, he said, Eleanor walked in this lane and she thought it was worth coming back to. And James thought she was worth remembering. He held Sarah's gaze. And I have been thinking, since October, that they knew something we are still learning. What did they know? She said. That some places, he said, are worth staying in. She looked at him. And some people, he said. Tom appeared from the vegetable beds. He assessed the situation with the thoroughness he brought to everything important. "Are you staying for dinner?" he said. "Tom," Sarah started. "I'm asking," Tom said. "Because if he is, I need to pick more beans." William looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at William. "Yes," William said. "I'm staying for dinner." "Good," Tom said. "I'll get the beans." He disappeared back into the vegetable beds. Then, from inside, Lily says hello. Lily, from somewhere near the apple tree, said something that was not quite hello, but was clearly intended as one. William looked at the garden, at the bench with two names, at the roses coming along the south wall, at the swing in the apple tree, at the woman beside him who had refused to leave and had been right to refuse. He thought about Eleanor walking this lane. He thought she would have liked this. He thought, she sent me here. He thought, I'm going to stop waiting for something bad to happen. He decided. Then he stopped. He came to evict her, with his lawyer, with the notices, with the expression of a man who had decided. She opened the door. I'm not leaving, so you'll have to decide what to do with that. He drove back to London. He did not take her to court. He went back on Saturday with a spade, and then he found the bench. The names carved in old wood. James. Eleanor, the man who refused to be forgotten, and the woman who walked in a lane and was worth remembering. To people who never knew what they were beginning, here is what we learned. The walls we build after loss, they are not armor. They are the thing that keeps out everything we need. She did not try to take the wall down. She refused to leave. She made tea. She let her son hand him a spade. And somewhere between the spade and the bench and the two carved names, the wall came down by itself. Tom said, stop waiting for something bad to happen. Decide to stop, then stop. He was 4 years old. He was completely right. The people we love don't leave us. Sometimes they walk in a lane and meet someone and carve the names on a bench so that 20 years later we will find it and understand. Eleanor walked this lane. She knew something he was still learning. Some places are worth staying in, and some people. That is everything.